Hello and welcome to this quick introduction to Octane Render for Cinema 4D. Before we dive into using the engine, let's briefly talk about some of the theory behind it. Octane is one of the first GPU accelerated render engines. What this means is that it uses the GPUs found in your system to generate photorealistic images. Pressing the render button will trigger a couple of events that will execute in the background. In the first stage, all scene geometry is collected and sent to the render engine. How fast this process is complete depends on the number of installed processor cores and RAM memory. Once it's done, Octane will proceed to part 2, which is to sample the image. In this stage, the engine utilizes all video cards it can find and uses them to sample the scene. The more GPUs are available, the faster the image will render. The time it takes to complete both geometry export and image sampling is the final render time per frame. Next, let's take a look at some of the Octane-specific interface elements that ship with the engine. You can access them via the dedicated Octane menu on top or on the plugins Octane for Cinema 4D. I will call the Live Viewer window, which is the heart of the engine. In the top left corner is one of the most important commands, which says send your scene and restart a new render. Right next to it, we have a few playback controls, followed by Octane settings. This command will call an additional panel that contains parameters organized under 5 major categories. We have kernels that control the quality and type of rendered images. Then we have camera imager with a few camera specific parameters such as exposure, gamma, saturation, and so on. Then the post tab allows us to add some post-processing effects such as glows, blooms, glare, and so on. Render passes is Octane's way of saying multipass rendering. And finally, settings contains some secondary Octane parameters. Additionally, with an object selected, you can access some of the Octane-specific tags found under the tags drop-down. As you can see, we have daylight, environment, light tag, object tag, and camera tag. These may be considered as a bridge between Octane Render and some of the native objects. For example, if you wish to take advantage of the camera-specific Octane features, we need a native Cinema 4D camera with the Octane camera tag assigned to it. Same applies for using lights, environments, and objects in some situations. Another piece of Octane information can be found under the Create menu of the Material Manager, Shader, Octane for Cinema 4D. This allows us to create Octane materials. With some of the theory out of the way, let's take a look at how to set up and render a simple scene from the ground up. For this lesson, we'll work with a project file you can access on the Maxon's content browser. If I play the animation, you can see we have a simulation of a few dynamic spheres falling down with gravity. Let's once again call the Live Viewer, and this time I'll use the Shift-C command and type Live Viewer. Press the Resend button. And there we go. This is our project file now rendering via Octane Render. If I navigate around, pan left or right, up or down, or zoom in and zoom out, the Live Viewer will update in real time. The sensitivity of the Live Viewer to these changes is controlled by the parameters under the Options menu of the Live Viewer. As you can see, by default it is set to update based on changes detected in cameras, materials and light. Additionally, it is looking for changes in scene geometry as well. What this means is that if I look through my project camera and play the animation, Octane Render will continue updating in real time while the timeline is running. If I pause it, the image will clean up. If I resume the animation, the live viewer will continue along with it. Next, let's take a look at creating a couple of Octane materials. One way is to use the Create